So I'm Carrie Mumford. I'm going to serve as temporary moderator because Raina is running a little bit behind, but she should be here soon. So to get started, we're going to introduce ourselves. So I can start. I was a freelance editor for a couple years and ended up stopping with freelance editing to focus on my writing. So now I write short fiction, and I just had a novel come out in June, and I'm working on my second novel now. And now on Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter V. Brett. I'm the author of the Demon Cycle series from Del Rey Books. Demon Cycle is published in 26 languages worldwide. The entire series is done, so if you're one of those people that waits for a series to be done, it's binge ready. I also worked for 10 years in the medical publishing industry, working as a editor, copy editor, proofreader, and production art director. So I actually have experience on both sides of the table when it comes to editing. My mom says my books are good.
I'm Ed Willett. I'm the author of 60-some books of one sort or another, both fiction and nonfiction. On the science fiction side, I'm published by DAW. This is my latest one, just came out in paperback after being out in hardcover, The City Born. My next one's called World Shaper, my 9th novel for DAW. It will be out in September 18th. I also have experience on the editing side. I was a newspaper editor to begin with, newspaper reporter and editor. And I've edited a number of magazines, including a literary magazine, Grain Magazine, one of Canada's longest-running and best-known literary magazines. I did that for guest editor for 3 issues. And I'm currently also doing some editing for Friesen Press, which is the self-publishing arm of the people who print books. And that involves quite a bit of substantial editing, all kinds of editing, right up to copy editing. I also want to mention, if you're interested in the topics of editing and writers, that I've just started a podcast called The World Shapers, worldshapers.com, and I'm interviewing authors about their creative process, and usually we focus on one particular issue, the central piece of that. And so far, we have interviews with it's just me, me and the cat. Robert J. Sawyer, Tanya Huff, and John Scalzi were the first 3 that I started with. Julie Schnider is coming up on Friday, and then Art Slade, who's one of the guests of honor here after that. And then I have Gareth L. Powell, Orson Scott Card, and Joe Haldeman lined up after that. And so I'm continuing to find more guests for that. So if you're interested, please check it out.
My name is Eileen Bell, and I write under E.C. Bell, and I write a paranormal mystery series called Marie Jenner Mystery Series. And I also did some editing back in the day. I was editing for On Spec. It's a speculative fiction magazine out of Edmonton. And I've had some good experiences with editing, and I've had some bad experiences on both sides of the table. So I'm quite excited to it.
That I was on a panel yesterday where we had both agents, the 2 Sams, and technically we could have had 2 ECs because one of my pseudonyms is E.C. Blake, which wrote the Masks of Agreement trilogy. We could have had E.C. Blake and E.C. Bell sitting. I guess we do, actually.
Technically.
Okay. 2 ECs.
Okay. Sorry for being a little late this morning.
Oh, hello.
A lot of fun.
I didn't see you come in.
Oh, great. Well, that's good. I snuck in under the radar. My name is Raina. I am a freelance editor here in Calgary, and I do all types of editing from manuscript evaluations to copy editing and proofreading. I have a variety of different clients, and I really love what I do, so it's fun. And I am the moderator here today. So I have my next question being, if you could talk a little bit about your editing experiences, specifically on the side of the early web, and what worked and what didn't, and if you had any, as you were mentioning, I think some maybe negative experiences, and what you would give as advice for other writers who might find themselves in the same position. Start with you, Carrie?
Sure. So I actually just had a really good editing experience. I mean, I went through a lot of rounds of edits with my novel because it took me 6 years to write. This is my first one. But I had a really good editing experience this summer with someone from the United States. Her name's Chelsea Clammer, and she specifically edits short stories. and she offers like a double package where she'll edit your short story and then she'll also suggest places to submit. So I'd polished this short story for about a year, and I had been submitting it and I wasn't having any luck, and so I sent it to her, and she noticed right away, I'd already had it edited by someone else, but she noticed right away that near the end of the story, I was missing a piece. Without explaining the whole story, I'll just say I was missing a chunk that left the reader unsatisfied. So it was an interesting experience because although I'd already had the piece edited, copy edited, it was spotless, it wasn't going anywhere. So once I sent it to a second pair of eyes, a different editor, I actually got a new perspective. And I've sent it out again. I wish I had a happy it got accepted after I changed it story, but I don't yet. But it is a much better story, and just getting that second perspective really changed things for me.
So I want to preface this. Can I ask a couple of questions first? How many people here, I don't want to ask if you're writers, because that's a loaded term. How many of you write? Okay. How many of you are working on a book right now? How many of you have a finished book that you're trying to sell? Okay. I know from experience and from being at a lot of conventions like this that people tend to look at the publishing world and be sometimes intimidated, sometimes afraid, sometimes worried. And you get on these panels and you hear about all of these horror stories about editing, and you get worried about that. Don't be worried about that. Worry about your story. And because sometimes you'll have a bad experience with an editor, and sometimes you'll have a good experience with an editor, but if you keep your focus on your story, all of those things are not going to be a big deal. And when you hear these sort of horror stories about somebody who got scammed by an editor, or an editor came in and rewrote my book and changed it into something that it wasn't, like, I know a lot of writers and I know a lot of editors, and I don't know a lot of real stories like that. So I don't think that you should be worried about that going into it. So with all of that being said, I've had 3 editors so far on my series, just for my U.S. publisher. I've had editors for my UK publisher as well, and since they're both in English, they sort of have a hand in things as well. But the editor who acquired me, Liz Shire at Del Rey Books, was amazing. She loved what I had done in my submission, but she also had a lot of ways to make it better, and some of them I didn't agree with, and we had some real arguments about it, but every one of those arguments ended up with the book being better. There were times when she would say, like, look, you've got 3 scenes showing how awesome this character is. And, like, they're all good, but you don't need all 3. And the book will move better and be paced better if you get rid of one of them. And that's the kind of thing that as a writer you don't want to hear, because you wrote this scene and you love it and you don't want to take it out. But when I took it out, I realized, oh, wow, the pacing does work better. And those are the sorts of things that an editor can do for you. It can tell you things that you don't want to hear. They can tell you things that, like, might hurt your feelings initially, but when you take a step back and think about it, you can see, like, oh, wow, that does make the book better. But you also need to be able to push back. So that editor, who was wonderful, was laid off before my first book was published. I turned in my second book, and it was given to a very famous editor who edits a lot of best-selling authors. She was on maternity leave at the time. She came back to an inbox full of manuscripts because she had inherited a bunch of authors whose work she was not familiar with while she was out on maternity leave, and came back and had to just get through that pile. And she took my second book without really being familiar with the series and line edited it without even talking to me, and sent it back to me, and it showed a really lack of understanding of what my book was all about. And I had to push back and say, look, thank you for your edits. I'm not going to use them. I'll find a way to fix this on my own. And I got beta readers, and I got my agent, and we edited the book anyway. And I'm really proud with the way it came out. And I don't blame the editor, because it wasn't her fault the way that worked out. But I had to be able to stand up for my work and say, look, I know what I'm doing, and no offense, but you don't know what I'm doing, and we're going to make that work. And then with my next book, I got another editor, because at that point I felt like the relationship was broken, through no fault of hers. I want to stress that. But I said, look, I just want a clean slate with somebody new. And then I got said, oh, wow, this, the books are bestsellers. He seems to know what he's doing. I'm going to edit with a very light hand. I don't really need to do a lot, which was fine for the next couple of books. She would read the book and she would say, here's where the weak points are. You go and fix them. And I would do that. But then my most recent book, I kind of rushed at the end because we were expecting a baby, and I turned in the book literally the day before the baby was born. And I knew that I had rushed the ending, and it was the ending of a 5-book series that I had been writing for 10 years. And so I went to this editor who had been editing with a very light hand, and I said, look, I need you to be rough on me. I need you to read this book and tear it apart and tell me what sucks, and don't be gentle about it, because it has to be good. It has to stick the landing. And I know that I wasn't doing my best work because I was rushing to the end, and I know that like for the next couple of months I'm going to be elbow deep in diapers, and I'm not going to be able to focus on that. So I need that. And she stepped up and really got in there and said, like, this is great, this is not great, this sucks, this doesn't suck. And what I've discovered is that when you're told what's wrong, the editor is usually right, or at least when they see a problem, there's really a problem. When they tell you how to fix it, they're usually not right. And that's something that you need to be able to work out for yourself. And sometimes it stings. Sometimes they take something that you love and they say this isn't good enough, and you have to hold your breath and take a step back and think about it, and don't respond right away because you're emotional right away. But then after you think about it, you usually think of a way that you can make things better, because you can always make things better. And I've been talking for a really long time.
Because I've written so many books in so many different nonfiction educational publishers, young adult fiction, I've written for small press, I've written for DAW. I've had quite a bit of experience with different styles of editing, different kinds of editing. So I'm going to start with DAW at the top. My editor there is Sheila E. Gilbert, the Hugo Award-winning Sheila E. Gilbert. And one of the great things about DAW is that the editors are also the publishers. So Sheila Gilbert and Betsy Wolheim own the company. At a lot of places, if you're selling a book, then an editor likes it, but they have to then sell it to there'll be a meeting, and then the publisher has to decide if they're going to take it or not. If you get in at DAW, if one of them wants your book, they'll publish your book. So that's great. Sheila is a big picture editor. So she doesn't do line edits. She's not telling me how to change specific scenes. It's always about, I don't understand why this character did that, or we need more explanation of this, or this didn't make sense. And it typically takes the form of a 2 to 3 hour phone conversation, the first half hour of which is talking about cats, and then you go on and talk about the book. So that's interesting, and I have to say that every time Sheila does that, the book is better afterwards. And in this podcast, Julie Schnider and Tanya Huff also have Sheila as their editor, and both of them, and I know this feeling too, is that when you work with one editor for a long time, and in Tanya's case, she's done 32 books with Sheila Gilbert as the editor, and when Sheila retires, Tanya Huff is going to quit writing fantasy. That's what she says. But you get to the point when you work with, if you're lucky enough to work with the same editor for a long time, you start to hear that editor's voice in the back of your head as you're writing, and often you think, oh, well, she won't notice this. I know she won't. I'll just skip over it, and then she comes back and she always notices. So if you get a really experienced editor, of course, Sheila's been in the business for 30-some years now and has edited an amazing number of books. She really knows what works and how to make things better. The funnier stories for me in editing editors is that I'm doing this a long time, but sometimes you'll get an editor who's like, at this point, they can be a third my age almost, because I'm almost 60. And I had one, I was writing a young adult series called The Shards of Excalibur, and I referred to some character as kind of an 80s throwback book. And I said she looked like she'd come out of a Dallas-themed costume party. And my editor, who was like 21, said, what's Dallas besides a city in Texas? And that was funny, and I thought, oh, she's so young. But you know what? She's absolutely right. This is the reference is not going to hit my readers either, because they don't know what Dallas is except it. Does anybody here remember Dallas, the TV show?
Only vaguely.
Yeah. I never watched it, but it was sort of in the background when I was, I guess, a teenager, early 20s. So even when you get something that seems kind of funny, sometimes the editor, because they are a different reader, they are seeing things that maybe you don't twig to. I'm having really bad experiences with editors. Not really. The pushing back thing is with working with another small press where I was more experienced as both an editor and a writer than my editor was. And they would try to tell me things that were so basic that it was it annoyed me, because it's like, you're not paying attention to where I am and my experience. But that wasn't really a bad experience. It was just slightly annoying.
Okay. Right now I have a wonderful editor, and her name is Rhonda Parrish, and she writes a ton of anthologies, so she edits like crazy. And I'm with a small press, so I feel like I got really lucky getting Rhonda. And before that, I'm book 5 in my series is coming out. And so when I started the series, the publisher was the editor, and she did a great job on that first book. She helped me clean up a whole bunch of stuff that was, because I had been working on that book for about 6 years, and I've been taking it to critiquing groups, and I was kind of at the other end. I listened to everybody in the beginning of my writing, and I figured if somebody saw a problem, I had to fix it the way that they said. And so I was rewriting this thing. One time I had somebody say, I think I've got 2 point of view characters, okay? And I had one person say, I think you should remove one of the point of view characters. I think it all should be written from this character's point of view. And I went, oh, okay. And I rewrote the book. And it was horrible. It just died. That was the lesson I needed, was that 3 months of rewriting that thing and trying to get it and realizing that, no, I was right. And that particular person was wrong. So I went back. But anyways, luckily she helped me clean up bits and pieces from all the different versions that I'd written. I don't know if anybody else has run into this problem, but like I'd have, let me see. For a while I had 2 bad guys. Okay, I write mysteries, right? So there's got to be the bad guy. Well, for a while I had 2 of them. And then I realized, somebody said, combine them, because they're doing the same job. You only need one guy. Well, but I was alternating names all over the place, and it was like horrifying to me, and I couldn't get a really, really good handle on it. And that search and replace, whatever it is, that wasn't working, and so she was very patient with me and helped me go through the thing and find all those crappy little bits that can break a book. They just, at the end, right? So I was pleased as punch with her, and the first book came out, and it did very well, and I was very happy. And then she wanted to do the second one, and I got a different editor for that one, and she did a fine job, and it went nicely. For some reason, second books they have trouble.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. What does my publisher call them? The red-headed stepchild of the series, right? And this is the book that I actually love the most, is that book. And so, anyways, I got through that. And the third book, my editor was pregnant. And so the deadline we were aiming for was to have it edited, completely edited, for her due date. So, and actually, things seemed to go pretty good, except she got a hold of an earlier version. I don't know what happened. It was bad. She edited an earlier version of the book and sent it back to me, and then I realized, my God, she'd done this. It was a mess, and it took me a long time to fix it, and I wasn't going to throw it back at her, so I got it to her, and I didn't hear anything. And then I found out by the grapevine that she'd gone in the day before I snapped all language back to her. She'd gone in to have her baby. And then she was gone. she wasn't answering my emails. She wasn't, because she was full on baby mode by that time, right? So it went back to my poor publisher. She had to. Luckily, we had it pretty well cleaned up, but it scared me because I thought we were going to miss. I thought I was going to miss my publication date and all the rest of it. And, like, you can't lose that, because you lose that once, and you may never get it back, right? Because publishers are busy. So that was fine. She's off now, doing the mother thing.
I've missed publication dates before. It's okay. It'll be
okay.
And
I haven't.
It feels like the end of the world at the time.
Oh, it did.
But it's not.
I was just terrified, right? So, anyways, we got through that, and then I got Rhonda. And Rhonda likes my writing. She gets my style of writing. And we can have some really good conversations about it. And she calls me on my crap all the time. And I'm finally strong enough that I'll listen to her. And I realize that my words are not really, none of them. All of them can be changed, except for the two-person point of view thing. That works. So
great. Well, thank you so much. I know I'm the moderator, but I do want to just hit on a couple of things that were mentioned here. So one is that you shouldn't rush the editing process. Leave yourself some time to do this, because it does take time. Mm-hmm. And people do have lives, so that's the long and short of it. Version control for your documents. Yes. Please label your documents properly. A name, a date, or a version number or something.
I have a horror story about that, too.
Oh, God.
In a nonfiction book, I wrote a biography of, which one was it? I think it was the Andy Warhol biography for an educational publisher. Maybe it was Johnny Cash. It was one of those two. And they came back and said, we want a revised version of it. And you have to cut, I think it was like 10,000 words out of this 21,000 word story without losing anything important in the biography. So I worked really, really hard on that and then sent to them the wrong version. And at their end, the editor screwed up, whoever it was, because I just got this weird email saying this is a little long. And I said, well, I'd already talked about that. It's like 500 words too long. I knew that. It's fine. What she didn't tell me was that she was looking at something that was 10,000 words too long, because I'd sent her the old manuscript instead of the new manuscript. And it never came back to me in any fashion after that, until I asked, how come I haven't been paid yet? And said, well, you didn't fulfill the... Yes, I did. And that's when we found out the problem had happened. So somebody else did all that editing. And probably a hatchet job. I haven't actually looked at it. So yeah, version controlled and stuff like that.
Does everyone here know what version control is? Does anyone not know what version control is? Raise your hand. Version control is labeling your documents. It is something that you need to train yourself to do, and it is absolutely essential if you want to exist in the professional publishing world to do it. The way I do it personally, I will label a document that's just the title of my book. That's my active document. That's the one I'm working on all the time. But on a regular basis, I will save a copy of that, and I'll say it'll be the title of my book and the date that I saved it on. And after a while, I'll build up a bunch of those copies, but don't worry about it. There's space on your computer to fit a ton of those. When you finish a first draft, or when I finish a first draft, it's the title of my book, and then V1. And then when I do a rewrite, I put it in track changes, and it'll say V1 _ track change. And that's my editing document. And I'll do all of my track changing in that, and then when it's done, I accept all of the changes, I turn off track change, and I save it as V2. And if you do that, if you train yourself to do that, and you don't have to do it the exact same way that I do, everybody has their own way of doing it, but if you train yourself to do that, you will never screw up which document you send to someone, and believe me, that can screw up everybody's job.
But never label something final, because then you find yourself doing...
Yeah, never ever label anything final.
Absolute final. No, really, I mean it this time, final.
You can do final if it's you're literally sending it to the printer saying print this now. But other than that, no.
There's actually a coffee mug I saw that has this whole list of final. I hate my life final.
Yep. I've used every one of those, I noticed. It was
great. The thing that I did want to just mention is that as editors, we usually aren't right. So I do have a story from a writing perspective on this. I wrote a short story, and I had it edited by our mutual friend and lovely editor, Rachel Small, and she edited it, and she had changed something, and I thought, oh yeah, there was a problem with that sentence, but what she did, I don't like it, so I'm going to change it, I'm going to run with it, and that's the point, right? Mm-hmm. That's the point of editing. We give you a suggestion, or we note that there's something going on here that isn't quite right, then your job is to write it, right? We're not the writers, we're the editors, so run with it. Play with it, try and figure out what that problem is. And the next question I have for our panelists is, hopefully this is a little bit shorter maybe, do you suggest that your editor be targeted to your genre? Because I get that a lot.
Well,
well, let's start with Carrie.
I'm trying to think what I wanted to say there.
This is actually quite timely for me because my first novel is women's fiction, and so I worked with an editor, Rachel Small, who'd had experience editing women's fiction and lots of it. And the next novel I'm working on is totally different for me. It's a Christmas romance. So I think I know I'll be seeking out a romance-specific editor. Because I indie publish, so I don't have the luxury, I guess, of traditional publisher in-house editing experience. So I'll be seeking out an editor that has traditional experience, but also has specific experience with editing romance, especially because it's my first romance, and I want to make sure I don't disappoint romance readers. But I do think it makes a big difference, like with my first example of going to a person who specifically edits short stories. I think if you find someone who's working in your genre, they're going to catch things that you might not. The same goes with beta readers, right? Like you want to find someone who's reading what you're writing because they're going to be looking for those things that you might miss. I think, yeah. I haven't done it yet though, so I don't know if it's going to work, but I hope it will.
A good, experienced editor, regardless of the genre that they work in, can make your work better. But if you're working in genre, it does help to have somebody who has experience there. I don't know that I have a lot more to say about it than that. One of my best editors is my mom, who has never read a fantasy book ever. But she's read a ton of other books, and she's sharp, and she knows what she understands, and she knows what she doesn't understand. And in a lot of ways, it's very helpful to me because since she's never read a fantasy book, when she hits something where she's like, I don't understand this magic thing, it makes me say, okay, maybe I didn't explain it clearly enough, because I want my books to be accessible to anyone. I want someone who's never read a fantasy book before to be able to pick up one of my books and understand it. And so having someone who doesn't have me what they don't get is really helpful to me. But it's also helpful to have an experienced editor who works with fantasy to say, like, I understand how magic systems work, and I don't understand why they were able to do this when the rules say that. And so both of those things can be really helpful.
I haven't hired an editor in that fashion, but working with smaller presses, my young adult, what do you call a 5-book series, a quintology?
Quintet.
Shards of Excalibur was published by Coteau Books, which is a highly respected literary publisher in Regina. And they hire freelance editors, and I was very fortunate there that they actually, I think they may have asked me for some suggestions, but they actually hired Matt Hughes, who's a very, very excellent science fiction writer himself and fantasy type writer himself, as well as an editor. And I think I think that book with the magic and stuff in it would have been harder to work with somebody who did not read that kind of stuff. I think there were parts of it that would have made them go, eh? And it's nice to have somebody who goes, oh, yeah, it's magic.
I'm almost of two minds. I like what you said about getting your mom to read your book. But somebody that is not in the caught in the genre, because they do. They catch the stuff that makes it inaccessible for others. But at the same time, I find it easier to work with someone who knows the genre, because then they call me on my stuff. To make sure that I'm following the rules, right? I got this cross-genre thing going on, right? So I'm doing this paranormal mystery, and so there are rules that go with that genre, and then there's rules that go with the paranormal stuff, and so it's nice to be able to, you got to catch them all.
Yeah.
It's okay to break the rules.
It's okay to break the rules, but you should know
Actually,
them at least.
it actually
have someone
is.
on your team who knows.
Yeah.
Because romance is the same. Romance has
Yeah.
a specific set of rules. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's good to know them at least before you break them. I mentioned a couple of times the word beta readers. Everyone know what a beta reader is? Yes, we're all good.
Anyone not know?
So can we talk a little bit about beta readers and professional editing and differences, what you would suggest first, that sort of thing?
I've never used a beta reader, so I don't think I have anything to add to this. Usually I'm writing, with the DAW books, I'm writing to a deadline. There's no time for anybody else to look at it. I get it written and I get it in. Now, when I was starting out in some of my earlier books, I was part of I had a couple of really good people who went on to become multiply published professional authors themselves, and we were all kind of beta readers, I guess, but I haven't used one for a long time. I know that seems odd. It seems like everybody has them except me. That's the way I work.
I learned a good lesson with beta readers with my first book because it took me so long to write because I was really learning how to write a novel. I had a lot of beta readers. I think I had 2 rounds. In the first round, I had 7 people. In the second, I narrowed it down to 3 or 4. But what the mistakes I made were I just chose people who were my friends that were eager about my book and they wanted to read it. And I thought, well, if they want to read it, then they'll give me good feedback. Not necessarily true. I got feedback like, it was good, which is not helpful. So I would say that now I have a very close-knit group of beta readers, people who are also writers. I have the odd reader. I have like 3 or 4 people now. But they're very specifically chosen for their skills. So I'll choose people who read in the genre, maybe, or people who read a lot. Writers who know my work and I know their work, and we're trading back and forth. Because I find that way you get better feedback. And then another thing I started doing on the second round was asking specific questions. Instead of just saying, here's my book, could you please read it? I would say, here's my book, or this scene, or this subplot, and then I'd get much better feedback from that. But I think as I go on, I'll have fewer and fewer beta readers. Definitely not 7 again.
With my first book, I had quite a few beta readers. I was at a stage in my career where I'm generally a pretty private person, but once the book was done and I really wanted to make it better, I needed help to make it better, I basically put out a call and was like, anybody, please read my book. And a lot of my friends volunteered, like some people that I knew from like my online journal, like back in like the live journal days, so relative strangers would read my book and give me comments, and my mom and whoever I could find to do it. And that really helped me a lot, and it made the book a lot better. But I learned a few things in that process, because after that first book came out and was a bestseller and did really well, suddenly I had, people looking over my shoulder, like wanting to see what I was doing. I had the fear that an older version of my book would somehow get out and people would read it, and that terrified me, because the last thing I want is for my fans and readers to see an early draft of something that's not my best work. And so I got a little more paranoid and a little more close with my work, and I didn't want to share it with as many people. But more than that, and this is something that's really important, and every one of you who's writing books needs to understand, when you ask someone to beta read your book, you are asking for a big favor. You are asking them to do something that it's going to take them many, many hours to do. If they do it right in a way that's really helpful to your writing, it's going to be many hours more than that, and it's going to be something that most people who do it get paid to do. And so you have to realize that this is an imposition that you're putting on people. And it's okay to do that if they're willing to do that, and it's okay to do it and not pay them if they're willing to do that. But you also have to realize that if you gave somebody your first book and they read it and they gave you great edits, that doesn't mean that they're going to give you free edits forever. And that doesn't mean that you're not asking them for a big favor every time, and they're going to eventually start to feel put upon and be like, why am I editing your books for you when you're getting paid to do it? Or why am I editing your books for you when you're not doing anything in return? So if you're asking a friend or someone you know to beta read your book, you owe them one. And remember that. Because you can lose friends over it. I've seen it happen. But with each book I've done, I've gotten progressively more private and more close-knit. At this stage, my best friend Mike Cole, who's also a writer, he beta reads all my books and I beta read all his books. My agent reads my books and gives me edits, and my mom. And then I will combine all of those and do a second draft of a book before I send it to my editor. And that kicks off the real editing process. So I've narrowed it down from a lot of people to just a couple of people who I really trust, and people who either have a vested interest in me or the success of the book, or someone that I'm doing the same favor for in return.
I actually have done beta reading paid. I don't know, the Saskatchewan Writers Guild offers a manuscript evaluation service, and I tend to get all the science fiction stuff that comes to us. But I think they charge, for 100,000 words, I think I get paid something like $350. I don't know how much the author is charged. And even that does not seem like enough.
I mean, look, and it's perfectly all right to pay somebody to read your book and edit it and give you feedback. But you can also be taken advantage of in that regard. There are certainly plenty of pseudo-professionals out there who are looking to take advantage of aspiring writers and get them to pay for editing. And so you have to be careful about that sort of thing and make sure that it's somebody that you trust and that you feel like you're getting your money's worth out of it.
I'm down to one beta reader now, and I only give her the manuscript if there's a problem that I can't figure out. And so she is really focused in on, is there a problem here? Have I lost my mind? Is everything running okay? Can you see the issues? And I trust her to give me good feedback, and I do exactly the same thing for her books. It is a huge imposition.
Yeah.
And it can be a big time suck. And so
when you're 25, it's not a big deal. But when you're an adult and you have adult responsibilities in adult life, like you don't have those hours to spare all the time.
That's exactly right. And the older you get, the faster that stuff goes. So
I definitely think trading manuscripts helps, to your point, because I have been in a situation where I have a writing acquaintance, and they always want me to beta read, especially with my editing background, and they don't reciprocate. And so sometimes when you beta read, you think, oh, that person will for sure, we'll trade, or when my book comes out, they'll read it. That might not even be the case.
Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of goes to my next question of expressing your expectations of the editor or beta reader or critique group, and how you manage those, your own expectations, and how you communicate that to the person who's looking at your work. Okay.
Mix it out.
Okay. Or maybe Peter, did you have something?
No. You're up.
I'm up. Okay. I learned over the years to get really specific about what I wanted out of the critique group or the beta reader or whatever. One or two questions, and focusing on problem areas in the book. That's the reason you send them out, right? Is to if you've got an issue, if you love your book and it rolls along and it's ready for the editor, you feel, then you don't need to use all the rest of it. But I try and get really, really specific about what it is I'm looking for so that they know. And that's basically it.
I don't use them, so I have nothing to say.
Say on the communication between editor and writer?
I will occasionally have a specific question for Sheila, and I can call her up at any time during the writing process. And we did that quite a bit on the book that's coming up called The World Shaper, because it's supposed to start an open-ended series, which it will if you all buy the book. And so we had to set it up so that I left that possibility there, and that we had it was quite complicated. So there was quite a bit of going back and forth where I would ask her, well, do you think this will work, and will that work? So there are times when I communicate with the editor about very specific things and ask for specific help, and she's very good about that.
Very early on, probably my second book. So I wrote 4 books before I wrote the one that I published. So earlier on, a book that never got published, never should be published, never will be published, I asked a friend of mine to read it, and she did. And she gave me a bunch of feedback about the things that she didn't like. And I got very defensive about a lot of it. I argued about a lot of it. It was very personal to me, and I had reasons why I did all the things, and I was debating all the reasons why I did all the things. And she left, and I thought that the conversation had been really helpful, and I was feeling good about what I was going to do next. And my roommate came over to me, and he said, look, I was listening to that conversation, and you owe her an apology. And he was absolutely right. Now, when I talk to a beta reader, if I ask somebody who hasn't read my books before, I say, look, I want your negative feedback. I want you to tell me what doesn't work. I want you to tell me what you didn't like. I want you to tell me what you didn't understand. And I'm not going to get offended. I'm not going to try and argue with you. I'm not going to push back. And you need to make that clear. You need to make it clear that, like, if this is a friend that you're asking for a favor, that it's not going to hurt your friendship if they don't like your work. In fact, them not liking your work can help you make your work better. And so those are the sorts of things that the caveats, like right in the beginning, if you ask somebody to beta read, you say, look, I would love it if you would read this book. I realize you're not getting paid for it, and I realize it's a lot of work. And if you never get to it, or if you don't finish it, or if you only send me a partial, that's all okay, and that's not going to hurt our friendship because I'm asking you for a favor here. And I realize you're busy and have a life of your own. But if you do give me that feedback back, I'm going to take it and not be stung and not have that negatively affect our relationship. And that shouldn't just be with friends. That should be with any unpaid person who's going to read your book and give you feedback for it. They're doing you a favor, and you need to treat them accordingly. That's how relationships get soured, when you don't have respect for the people that are doing that favor for you. So those are the important things I think you need to communicate. And then after that, everybody reads differently. And so you can't really tell someone what kind of feedback you want on a more granular level because you don't know what they're going to find. And you don't want to point out the weak spots in your manuscript to somebody and ask them what they think. You want to let them see if they find them or not. At least that's how I view it.
Do you have anything to add? I know you touched on it.
I'll just add quickly that I think depending on where you are in your manuscript, 5 minutes. Oh, she just gave us the wave. Depending on where you are in your manuscript, you might want different types of feedback, which I guess is obvious, but I learned that the hard way. So when I got close to the final draft, I just wanted someone to read it and tell me, are there any glaring things that are going to, especially because I'm publishing independently, are there any glaring things that I've missed or that are going to embarrass me? So at that point, I gave it to someone and said, can you just read this and tell me if it is not embarrassing? Like, it was very high level feedback, but earlier I wanted way more detailed feedback. Often it's that you are in the process, you might ask for different types.
Okay, well, thank you. We do have 5 minutes for questions. If you'd like to go ahead.
If an author's written successfully 20, 30 books, and you're asking your editor what you were talking about seeds being
Yeah.
How you were, as an author, why wouldn't you
Because you're too close to your own work, and that's really what comes down to editing and beta reading and everything else. Is that I can self-edit pretty good if I wait 6 months and then look at it. But you're right there in the middle of it, and particularly when you're dealing with somebody like Sheila who edits, she must have 20 novels a year that she's edited. she has seen everything and knows what works and what doesn't work. So she's. I mean, I'm pretty widely read, but she's really widely read in these kind of things. So it's just because you're just stuck. You're just a little blinkered. You need somebody to give you that bigger picture.
And the creative process is not done independently. It's not. I think it's definitely nice to have a little bit of back and forth at some point, right?
Yeah, even if in my case it's like when I submit the book and I get feedback, but still that feedback is important.
I've written 9 books, and every time I start a new book, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, there's that.
So, like, there's no point in any writer's career where they're like, I know it all.
Does anybody else have a question?
I've heard some debate between the definition of a beta reader and an alpha reader. What do you guys see value in 2 separate types of readers?
I don't know what an alpha reader is.
I don't either.
I've never heard of that term.
The leader of the pack, I guess. But.
I mean, is an alpha reader someone that's paid?
No, well, see, so there's debate on it. I've heard alpha reader is somebody who's paid, beta reader is somebody who isn't. Beta reader is somebody who's looking for content goals. Alpha reader is somebody who's looking for numerical. I've also heard it the other way. I just think it's
I feel like you're overthinking this.
I feel like this goes back to the question of being very particular about what you want from the person you are sending a manuscript to. So you need to be clear in where you are, like Carrie said, where you are in your process, and what you want from them. And then send them a gift basket. They're doing it for
We also didn't mention the benefit of a good copy editor. That will catch a lot of stuff that you like, those names. And
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The process of finding an editor, you use like test edit. Like how have you gone and found someone who's compatible with you or that's aligned with you or good for you?
I mean, if you're going through traditional publishing, like publisher buys your book and they assign you an editor. That's usually it's the editor who read your book on the slush pile and picked it out and bought it. And so you don't really get a choice in that matter unless your career reaches a point where you can, fire an editor and go to somebody else.
Good kind of so to get to that point, I think they choose an editor to help polish before you submit. So
I think Carrie.
Recommendations for sure. Talk to other writers that you know, or go to writing groups and classes and talk to other people. Ask in online forums, but definitely recommendations, and do a test edit for sure. See if you're compatible.
All right, I think our time is up then.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So reach out to you on Facebook about the